Everyone, and welcome to Moorepay's webinar on the payroll industry briefing, predicted trends in 2024. I'm Clarice Lambert, the brand marketing manager here at Moorepay. And straight into the agenda today. After a bit of housekeeping at the start of the call, I'll introduce you to our panel of fantastic experts with us today. We'll then outline the premise of the report, and we'll reveal the 5 headline findings, and each of our experts will share some fantastic content behind each of the stats to kind of put it in context for everyone. We'll have a live Q&A where you can ask any questions that have come out of the call for anyone here on the webinar. And also at the end, I'll just share how you can access the full report and any other resources that might help you. To ask our experts a question in the Q&A at the end of the call, please just use the GoToWebinar question panel that should be popping up on your screen. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as you can. And also it would really help if you could mention which person you'd like to answer the question if you can. Also, don't worry if you're facing any technical difficulties, as we'll be sending everyone who's registered this recording and the webinar slides after the webinar. So yeah, if you need to scooch halfway through, don't worry, it'll all come to your inbox. And just a tiny little bit about Moorepay for anyone who's new here. We've been around for nearly 60 years now, and our mission is to make payroll and HR easy. For all of the reasons on the screen is why our customers choose us. So from our secure technology to our trusted team of experts, and also our industry awards, including the Payroll Service Provider of the Year award that we won with the CIPP recently. And we've got a guest speaker with us today from the CIPP, so that's a very exciting little link there. This is how we make payroll and HR easy on the screen. If you'd like to learn any more about us, I won't go through it now, but please do just pop into the chat and one of our advisors will follow up with you if you want to just get any more information about what we do. And now it's time to meet our panelists today. We've got quite the cast for you. So we've got Anthony Vollmer, the Managing Director here at Moorepay, accompanied by David Morris, Chief Operating Officer as well at Moorepay. We've got Sarah Dowzell, Chief Operating Officer at Natural HR, which is our sister company, and a co-founder of Natural as well. Christina Holloway is head of our managed services in payroll, and so has a lot of great payroll insights for you. And of course, we've got Vickie Graham, our guest speaker from the CIPP, who's Business Development Director of the CIPP. And I know we really want to get into it, so let me introduce you to this report. So the end of 2023 marks the 5th year that we've run Moorepay's Annual Payroll Survey, which is, to our knowledge, the UK's biggest survey in the payroll industry. We began this back in 2019 because we're just passionate about driving valuable improvements in payroll software and services for everyone in the industry. So we do the survey every year and then we publish the results for free. So this webinar is just intended to help you digest what we found in this survey, and so you just feel informed about the marketplace and the support available to you. It also gives you the opportunity to hear the opinions of not just, the small team who have conducted the survey, but the thought leaders in the industry, and ask them any questions you have on this report. And yeah, with 5 years of data to look back on, we've discovered some year-on-year trends, as well as what's on the horizon for 2024. It's going to be very fascinating. Just if you're interested in how the survey was conducted, we've collected responses from 731 professionals working in payroll. I won't go into the specifics which you can see here, but we promoted the survey to many people in the industry across different business sizes, different industries, different job titles as well, in-house, outsourced and bureau organisations. So there's a real spread of opinions, and we try to make it as, you know, as fair and diverse as possible. So getting into our 5 headline findings that we want to share with you from this report. The first finding, and quite exciting, is that payroll outsourcing uptake is at the highest rate since 2019 when we started the survey. So this year alone, we saw a 27% increase in UK businesses who are choosing to outsource their payroll to an external provider, with payroll uptake the highest it's been since we started the survey in 2019. And you can see, to mirror this, there's also been a 19% drop in businesses processing their payroll in-house using payroll software, which is that top line there. So even though most popular, there is quite a significant drop there. And that has been, you know, fairly stable for the previous 3 years before then. Yeah, however, overall, keeping that payroll processing in-house remains the top choice, with just over half of the respondents saying they've chosen this method. And now a question for Christina, our panelist. Do you think that we expect to see this trend continue, so away from in-house software to outsourcing payroll?
Thanks, Karis. Good afternoon to everybody who's joined us today. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm glad to see that the trend has matched the predictions that we made in previous years, so which is interesting to see. So the reasons we stated previously were the reasons which clients cite to us, were the reasons that they give to us when they outsource their payroll, and they're still very relevant and compelling today. So compliance and keeping pace with the ever-changing legislation, and not just with all the complex of payroll legislation, but also data protection, cyber security, all those sorts of things are very serious concerns, which are, you know, compel businesses to feel that they want to go to a trusted provider rather than to keep that responsibility in-house. Time and money, again, saving time, releasing resources so that they can look and focus on their main core business activities is another very important reason. Money is an interesting one, which I think will be discussed a little later on. Yes, it's proven to be cheaper to outsource. There is an initial investment, but for long-term investment, it is definitely cheaper and, interestingly, predictable. So businesses want to be sure of what the costs of their payroll provision will be, rather than having the uncertainty of what might happen with their in-house resources. So when we come to money and timing savings, with the resources looking at other core activities, this leads to more support with business growth. Now, one of the big benefits of outsourcing are our powerful reporting tools and analytical tools. Now, to make good business decisions, we need payroll data is extremely powerful, and to be able to get really rich analysis, and to have that extra time to see the trends and to examine what is in fact their biggest spend in any business is extremely useful, and leads to faster decisions as well. So that's another big reason for compelling reason for people to outsource. But of course, in-house payroll experts has huge added value to a business. I am aware of that, but the one topic which always comes up is the single point of failure. What happens when the person has planned or unplanned absence? They have to make sure that there's cover for that. So that always leads to extra cost, and is always that anxiety, and you never know when that payroll manager will be moving on. So that's, it's great when it's works well, still the most popular as we can see. But because the businesses value it so much and it's such a critical function, there is conversely that risk. What happens when we have to replace that person? And of course, the employee experience, which is becoming a more and more of a consideration. It's not just about getting the payroll accurate, getting your payslip right, making sure you're paid on time. It's about ease of access to that payslip. How easy is it to understand that payslip? How can they self-serve? All of those tools you are probably going to have with an outsourced provision rather than in-house. So that's kind of what we put forward before, and that seems to be bearing, what the trend seems to show. But is it going to continue? Well, I've got a number of thoughts on that, and of course I think yes, it is, even though, as I've said, in-house is still very popular and a valuable resource for any business. But what we're seeing across the industry is the demand for automation and analysis. So we've said before that the role of payroll, be really interested to talk to Vickie about this and how it's changing. Automation and the expectation that these processes will run smoothly and have less and less human intervention will mean that the role of a payroll professional is much more about analysis and the use of data. And this is why people are coming to the experts to make use of the tools that we're investing in. So I do think that is something that is becoming a bigger driver than it has been in the past. The other trend that is definitely gaining pace is that companies are going towards a more holistic approach to the management of their workforce. We've said for some time now that they're leaning into payroll and HR integration and all the benefits that brings. But also they want benefits and auto-enrollment, time and attendance, expenses. They want all in one place and easy access. So those are the, that's kind of a whole different approach. So this is where your outsourced providers can give you. And also, my third point would be bureaus are changing. So outsourced providers, it's not just a one size fits all. So if I outsource, I lose control. This is what you hear quite a lot. I like to, the business likes to keep a firm control on their payroll. If you go out and look, you will see that there are a huge variety of available with varying measures of control where, you want the provider to most of the processing or all of the processing or all reporting, or you want to maintain control, and there's various levels available. So look around and you'll be surprised that you know, we are looking to see what businesses want and how we can work with them. It's in our interest, and we're not as rigid as, say, we were 20 years ago, when it was, like I said, this is the form, you fill it in and that's it. And finally, as the trends are showing here, and you'll see later on, it's easier to make that move. People are citing that hassle of, you know, actually going out, finding and getting all the data ready and transfer of data, and the inconvenience of learning something new is decreasing. Still there, but we are making it easier for people to make that first move. And that's also because we're investing a lot in user experience of products. So yes, I think the trend will be continuing in the direction, and dare I say, I think it will be getting sharper.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was really, really interesting. And I'm sure a few of you have some questions off the back of that. So if you do want to delve into any of that in any deeper, then please just ask Chris a question in the question panel that should be on your screen. Great, and the second headline stat for us today is that businesses are still taking potentially some security risks with their payroll data. So shockingly, we've seen a 67% increase in a return to outdated managed services, such as using paper, telephone or email input, which is hardly the direction we were expecting. So that's that turquoise line at the bottom. So you can see, although not picked up by loads of people, there is quite a big increase this year, which is quite surprising. 22% of businesses are using managed payroll services that require some data input, which, although it is industry standard, it could potentially be insecure if it's not done correctly. So Dave, when sharing payroll information, what can businesses do to ensure security, please?
Thanks, Caris, and good afternoon, everyone. I mean, obviously, this is a very big topic and very big question in its own right about what can businesses do to manage and transfer data securely. I'm going to try and summarise just a few areas for people to consider. So rather than do a full deep dive into the full data cybersecurity pieces, which would no doubt take the rest of the call in its own right, as I say, I'll just touch on a few that I think are probably most pertinent. I think one of the first things to say is we do encourage our customers at the right time to call us. We like talking with our customers, and telephone obviously has a very important place when discussions are needed or confirmation is needed, and things can often get lost in translation when using email or chat or other functions. So I'm considering the telephone conversation as a slightly separate one to this. Obviously, payroll requires the handling and management of some of the most sensitive data that our colleagues have. And colleagues trust their employees and in turn their suppliers with that personal data, and so we must take that incredibly seriously. It's worth noting that much has changed in how data is handled over recent years. Two of the more prominent ones have been the move to cloud storage as connectivity speeds have increased. Companies are finding it more secure and much more efficient to use cloud storage systems. And obviously the move to remote working, particularly due to COVID, are probably two of the more prominent changes that we've seen recently. Again, it is an enormous topic, but I'd encourage those people listening and our customers to consider not just the system and the process questions around data security, but also the people aspects as well. Studies and research have indicated that over 70% of data breaches and data losses do have some form of human element, and that must be considered when putting in place the plans that companies need to have. I think it needs buy-in from all levels of the organisation. So it does start at the very senior management, the board level. Management teams should be talking and focusing on data management just as much as other aspects of the business. And everybody across the business needs to understand the importance and their role and what to do to correctly handle and look after data. So, for example, Moorepay runs regular compulsory compliance training around this area, and we do follow up very rigorously with the colleagues and the managers of those colleagues where the training hasn't been done. And we also run ad hoc tests, for example, to make sure that what has been learnt in the training has sunk in and being applied. So we do ad hoc tests on phishing emails, for example, just to make sure that our employees have understood what the training was involving. So whilst everyone is responsible, we then get the risk that there's no one person accountable. What many good practices would recommend is to have that single accountable within the business who sets the policies, makes sure people are adhering to those policies, and also acts as the data champion across the business as well. On the process side of things, good practice again would suggest that it's best to manage and look at data management as risk mitigation. It is often better and more efficient to manage risks than issues, and I think that's very much the case here. One example of this would be risk assessing new and existing suppliers, for example. Not just for payroll, but talking about the payroll piece, it is, again, handling the most sensitive of data. So looking at what's their position, what's their posture on data management. Are they willing to share certificates and accreditations, for example? Do they have dedicated teams focusing on this? Do they use external specialist suppliers? So Moorepay and our parent company, Zellis Group, use a company called Comism for exactly the purpose of monitoring 24/7 all our internal and external products and applications and networks. When sharing data with providers, such as payroll providers, it is often best to use their products to do so. So where these products are modern, well-designed products, the security will have been designed in from the start. It will be part of how the product operates. So just as with data storage and using leading cloud suppliers, it's preferable to do this rather than have local process working, which often involve hard drives and pieces of paper. And what you're doing by that is you're taking advantage of their security investments and their security experts, so you benefit from that, but and it's one less thing to be concerned about in this very complex and very tricky area. As you said, Caris, there's still a lot of information shared by email. And if it must, and that's the best way for it to work, I'd encourage everyone to use best practice around this. Simple things such as encrypting the data, password protecting the files, must use SFTP sites, this secure file transfer protocols, which use highly secure servers to store data on. But make sure they're time bound as well. Don't leave data sat on there for long periods of time. We use 24 hours as a guide by which data should be left in those SFTPs, and I'd encourage you to do the same. And again, when it comes to things like pay slips and other documents around payroll, would again encourage you to use the products and the online systems rather than paper ones for this. So I've given a very whistle-stop tour of what is a very big topic, but if anyone's interested in learning more, I'd strongly encourage them to go to the National Cyber Security Centre website, and it's got a really good 10-step guide, which is very easy to use, very easy to follow, and that lays out some well thought through and some industry best practices which you could look to apply for your businesses. So thank you, Caris.
Thank you, Dave. I love that there were some really actionable insights from that, so I'm sure lots that the audience can take away. Again, if anyone has any particular questions, then you can pop it in the comments or go to the site that Dave just mentioned. So on the third headline for us today is that HR and payroll software integration uptake has doubled since 2022, so since the last time we took this survey. So it's been rising steadily since 2019, but we've seen just shy of a 100% uplift from 2022 in businesses who are connecting their payroll and HR software via API integration. So although API integration remains the least popular solution overall, this significant uplift, which you can see on this bottom grey line here, could indicate that usage is going to continue to rise. And for a bit of insight on this is Sarah. Sarah, what are the benefits of using an integrated payroll and HR software? And why do you think this is driving popularity now?
Thanks, Caris. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with the issues at hand. I'm sure many of us on the call are familiar with the complexities of running separate HR and payroll systems, the duplicated manual data entry, the time it takes to do that, the room for error, and the security considerations, as Dave's pointed out. It's a process really that almost seems archaic in today's digitally driven world. I also know what it's like to be the person saying to your employees, I'm sorry we missed your expense claim or your commission claim this month, and I'm sure I'm not alone in having those conversations in businesses. So it doesn't surprise me that actually a world where these processes are fused as one seamless, error-free system is the way to go. But really that's not all the benefits. If we stop and think about how many software tools are used in our businesses, having that single HR and payroll system, it can create a much more cohesive and streamlined experience for our employees as well, not just the HR and payroll or finance colleagues using those. Then if we consider the cost benefits, we've got the direct vendor cost savings going out to market for one integrated system, and that might be becoming more relevant as we can see in the research. Businesses are taking cost saving measures when it comes to their suppliers, perhaps due to the cost of living crisis. We've also got the indirect cost savings of managing one contract, one procurement exercise, one budget line rather than two. So an integrated system, it's not just intelligent, it's really timely with the things that businesses are facing in today's world. And then it's not just about replacing two systems with one, it's about reaping the benefits of efficiency, accuracy, employee satisfaction and financial prudence. So I think businesses are considering this more. Integration isn't just a feature, but actually it's a strategic advantage to their businesses, which is why we're seeing it uptick.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. I think that was a really good, overview of the benefits and why people are going more towards that solution. Thank you. Again, if anyone has any questions on that, please pop it in the question panel. Our fourth headline is that payroll frustrations are on the rise. So in 2021 and 2022, we reported a year-on-year drop in payroll frustrations listed by respondents. However, in our last survey, November, December last year, there's been an average across all pain points listed of a whopping 73% increase in the number of frustrations reported. So you can see it in that the navy bars on this graph, that all of them are higher except the category that says none. And the top frustrations recorded were calculating holiday pay at 22%, limited reporting and analytics, and limited functionality. We've also seen other less common frustrations are on the rise as well, including that payslip accuracy, which has increased quite significantly, even though it is still quite low compared to the others. So Vickie, how, in your opinion, can providers and customers work in partnership to reduce these frustrations, do you think?
Thanks, Caris, and hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me. So I think, first of all, it's maybe a little bit surprising that frustrations did reduce in previous years, given what was happening in 2020 and 2021. But perhaps that's why frustrations were lower. There was only one frustration at the time, and that was COVID and the CJRS. With regards to the frustrations shown in this year's survey, and it's really interesting to see where those increases are, I think for things such as holiday pay, which is obviously the largest increase here, that's a legislative change. That's something that, you know, it has changed previously. We thought that there was some clarity around the regulations. It's changing again. So that comes with a lot of frustration, as do other changes in legislation, such as changes to the national living wage or in-year national insurance changes, as we've just seen. Those are clearly going to cause frustrations within payroll teams and within payroll software development. But the other areas that are highlighted through the survey, and you've mentioned there the limited reporting and analytics and limited functionality, as well as kind of payslip accuracy, which is much lower but still increasing. There are some other key jumps there in technology, lack of automation. So these to me are all linked. They're all similar. They're all pointing back to the relationship between the customer and the provider, which is what we're talking about today. And Christina referenced earlier the powerful reporting tools that are available and their impact on decision making. Systems today should be able to analyze data and produce those meaningful reports. So that shouldn't really be a frustration, yet we see it's one of the top 3 and it's increasing. Similarly, functionality and system enhancements and technology enhancements are improving all the time, particularly with AI, artificial intelligence, and RPA, robotic process automation, which are kind of buzzwords that are used quite a lot at the moment in the industry and are 2 very different things that are not always understood. And you mentioned earlier, Caris, that one of Moorepay's objectives is around making payroll easier. So technology should be able to support that, and automating processes should be possible within your system. Technology should be able to do that. The expectation is there. Artificial intelligence is perhaps not as widely used at the moment as automation, but we are starting to see some really good and clever examples of that coming into the industry, and particularly amongst the service providers who are able to develop those and test those and roll out to their clients. So I think with that in mind, my view is that the frustration isn't to do with payroll per se, other than those legislation areas. The frustrations around not having that true partnership with your provider, whether your provider is a software provider and you're running your payroll in-house, or whether your provider is a service provider, an outsourced provider at whatever level of support that may be. And we heard from Christina that nowadays, you know, that could be completely outsourced, fully managed, it could be partially. There's several options available. But I think in terms of coming back to the question and how can providers and customers work in partnership to reduce those frustrations, communication is key, and communication should be regular and 2-way. And I smiled when I heard David talking earlier about security issues, and the fact that, you know, really encouraged to pick up the phone and have a conversation, and that encouragement to speak to Moorepay is there. Because a phone call can be incredibly powerful. A conversation can be incredibly powerful, more so than email or chatting on a portal, because things can be misunderstood and you might not get to the why of the frustration and the root cause of what is behind the complaint or what is behind the query or the question that's being posed. Whereas having that one-on-one, whether it's phone call or face-to-face, really helps to support that. So I think key to reducing frustrations, key to having that partnership is communication, having that as regular and 2-way. I think customers play a really big part in that. So in my experience, quite often I will hear people saying, well, it's not up to me. The providers should be telling me they should be doing this, they should be doing that. And yes, I have some empathy, some sympathy with that. Providers should be proactive in pushing out communications, informing customers, making sure that there's training available, picking up the phone to their accounts to ensure that they're aware of what's going on. However, customers have a responsibility or an accountability as well, and should be sharing their frustrations with their providers, explaining what they're trying to achieve and where the frustrations are, not necessarily the process that they're following to get to where they want to be, but certainly what they're trying to get out of that process, so that a provider can then actively listen and understand what the end result should be, and therefore either develop the systems to provide the solutions or improve their training and support to customers to ensure that what's already there in terms of functionality or in terms of reporting or automation or whatever that might be is fully understood and fully utilised. So there's definitely a responsibility on both parties within that partnership. That's what a partnership is about, right? It's about having joint ownership and joint responsibility. And I think, you know, if I come back again to something David mentioned earlier, when referencing security, and that provider systems are designed with the security built in, so use that. The same can be said for process efficiencies and eliminating frustrations within payroll. If you as a customer are sharing what you're trying to achieve as opposed to how you're trying to get there, your provider should be able to listen, develop that functionality if it doesn't exist already, and find the most efficient way of achieving that desired result, so that you as a payroll professional are able to spend more time on the human role of payroll and adding value to your organisation and presenting those reports back to your C-suite, your chief executives, and the decision makers within the business.
Thank you so much, Vickie. And I liked your point on, you know, both the two-way communication and for customers to kind of share the end goal to their providers, not just the process that's currently followed. I think that's a really good insight there. Great. And our last point is that despite it getting easier to switch providers, more businesses actually haven't gone through the switch last year. So we asked people who have switched in the last year, when switching payroll provider, how easy did you find it? And the good news is that switching your payroll provider is getting easier. You can see to the right of that first graph that there's just 2% of people who are saying it's very difficult, which is a decrease of 85% since last year. And with 42% of people who found it kind of neither easy nor difficult. However, despite this, you can see in the bottom graph there, those that were considering switching but decided not to go through with it rose dramatically. So this rose by 31% last time, and it has risen again by a further 28% between 2022 and 2023, showing a continuing trend towards an overall reluctance to switch providers. So our final question, and we are spot on for time, by the way, Anthony, is that why aren't people switching providers now, do you think?
Thank you, Karis. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Yeah, don't worry, Karis, I got the time prompt. I will be brief and build on some really excellent points from everyone else. I thought I'd just break this question into a couple of parts. So the first part is why not switching, and the second part is now, because I think this is very much a question of timing. You know, as we were talking about earlier, the switching process, and as you just mentioned, right, is getting a bit easier. And I'll talk about that more in a couple of minutes, because I think if you haven't been through a switching process for a number of years, things are changing quite fast. But the bigger question that all of us have to face, in any organisation, whatever sector you're in, public or private, large or small, is change requires an investment of time and effort and, of course, money. And therefore, you've got to have the will and you've got to be able to make the case for change to your colleagues. It's rare the person who has the autonomy to just be able to get out of bed in the morning and say, I'm going to switch and let's get on with it. And you're lucky if you are. So the general intent to switch, I think, is rising. But as the data shows, people are finding it hard to kind of jump across the line and actually, go through a process, select a provider, and then invest the time in the change. So I just thought I'd explore that briefly. The nub of it, I think, is in a few areas. So one is obviously the economic case, because no decision that any of us can make these days, goes without a business case where you're having to kind of assess, right, well, what am I spending today? What would I spend in the future? What's the cost of the change? What benefit do I get from the change? And often the costs component of that, the direct costs, are quite easy, because you can look at what you're paying today. You can get some quotes for what you might pay in the future based on your requirements. You can look at the cost of the change and you can assess that. What is so much harder always is to make the case for the benefits, and in general, when people are changing, they tend to want more capabilities, and we've heard about a lot of those today. So I want more capabilities. So I probably expect to invest to get those capabilities, but I want to return from that, and I want to be ultimately in a better place at the end of that process than I was at the beginning. And that means you have to look at the indirect costs and benefits across the business. And again, building on many of the things that people have said earlier, broader activities and processes in a business that impact productivity and employee productivity that, again, everybody works with day in, day out, and are on the receiving end of when processes don't work. This is where, at scale, some of the real benefits can be. And obviously more automation, better reporting, etc., helps, but also just a better employee experience, which is much more intangible. It's most tangible when something goes wrong with an employee experience and the time and effort cost of sorting something out, but it's intangible when it goes right. But it's kind of captured in the sentiment of a well-organized organization, competently run, where the data is clean, it's organized across the business, things happen when they're meant to happen, and people find people processes straightforward, and that is so closely linked to ultimately payroll and how payroll works. So much of the kind of the people data flow within an organization is linked to payroll, as we all know. So there's a big benefit there to tap if you're not tapping it already, and that, which obviously goes on to what Sarah was talking about in terms of how HR is increasingly, and it always has been, but I guess technology now allows it to be, so closely linked to payroll, so that every action in an HR process that is pay affecting should just flow through to pay, and it should be very light touch on the way through, and that if you're not running your organization in that way, clearly moving to that can be a big change, but the benefits can be considerable. And then we get lots of advice out there in terms of how to get a sense for, because it's easy to talk about these things, it can be very hard to put numbers to them, but some really good case studies to say, right, well, I was here, I started with this system or that system or this setup, and I moved to here and I had to invest this much in the change, but this is the benefit that I got. So lots of case studies around and lots of learnings. And then another intangible benefit, and not to repeat everything that Dave said earlier, but if you haven't looked at your processes for a period of time and things haven't changed, then you should absolutely consider the security implications of how you're operating now, because they might be a bit out of date. They might not be, but they might be. And we all know, when looking at a risk register across a business or looking at a process that hasn't been looked at for a number of years, that often we look at it with a fresh set of eyes and go, right, actually XYZ needs addressing. So there are other kind of what I'll call kind of business continuity or risk aversion benefits, which are very hard to quantify in a business case, but bring very real benefit, as any of you will know who've been on the receiving end of any incidents. So I think, I'd encourage everybody, if thinking about switching, to just think broadly and ask for help around how to understand what the benefits of moving could be. And then finally, obviously, don't underestimate the time and investment required in switching, but don't be scared by it either. The days of, you know, months and months and months of work to switch providers are receding. Obviously, it depends on the scale and complexity of your organisation, but things are a lot faster than they used to be, and I think in the near future will become even quicker. And you know, so much of the technology being developed at the moment will enable large amounts of data to be moved very efficiently, and most importantly, for it to be checked to a very high standard in an automated way, which can be obviously where so much of today's manual work can be. I guess to summarise, Karis, I think, you know, whilst people might not be switching right now, and clearly the economic environment isn't conducive to a lot of extra business investment right now, there is a strong case to be made, and people can get help to make that case. And there can be some really, really broad benefits to an organisation of making the change, but potentially broader than people have previously thought.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That was, yeah, very useful. Thank you. Great, we've got some time for a few questions from the audience now, not just from me next. So I'll just get up the question panel. Bear with me. Oh, we've got some interesting comments here. Someone has asked, payroll accuracy is 200% more frustrating. So this one is for Vickie. Quoting, payroll accuracy is also 200% more frustrating. What types of things could be included in here? So what could make payslip accuracy more frustrating? Vickie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, happy to take that one, and actually something I could have answered in the initial section anyway. So payslip accuracy there has increased in terms of frustrations, 200%, as you said. I think that links back to the frustrations in legislation. So holiday pay calculations, for example, we know that was changed. So the 12.07% was no longer lawful following the Harper Trust versus Brazil case last year. We know that's changing again from April of this year. What we also know from CIPP's research is that when the 12.07% became unlawful, is that a number of people were still using that that calculation, and therefore would have been doing so non-compliantly, not deliberately non-compliantly, but non-compliantly. So I think there's changes such as that legislation. I think, you know, we're also have recently run a poll on whether or not software had been able to implement the change to the national insurance rate for January this year, which is obviously an in-year change. If software wasn't able to do that, then that would have led to inaccuracies in the pay slips. So I think part the reason for the increase in payslip accuracy being a frustration is those changes in legislation. It's also conflicting legislation, so where we have things such as national minimum wage and salary sacrifice arrangements that could potentially impact that. So things like that, I think, are the reason for payslip accuracy having increased as a frustration to the level that they have.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really good answer. Hopefully it filled you in there, Mike. Great, and we've got another one. I think this will be for Christina, as it relates to your question. Are we at our side seeing any increases in in-house payrolls taking out BCP services with the service provider? Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
Sorry, Karis, I couldn't hear that properly.
So are you seeing any increases in in-house payrolls taking out BCP services with a service provider?
I think really from our perspective, we wouldn't see that. So it's not really something that I can comment on at the moment, being in an outsourced environment, as to sort of see what they're bringing in. But perhaps I can take that one away, Caris, and come back to the question.
No problem. I guess it's not necessarily our world of that one, but we'll try and answer you separately, Kelly. Thank you. This one, I imagine Christina or David, it would be good for. Ollie is interested to learn about how payments are approved and executed in a managed payroll service, please.
So in a managed services, now I think, as I mentioned before, there are different levels of services. So generally, when the final reports are signed off by a client, we get approval, and then we can either just process them automatically after a certain time. So for example, on our standard payroll offering at the moment, managed service, we would produce a preview for our clients. They will give us any last minute changes, say, for example, leavers, etc. And then once we've produced the final report, we have deadlines which are published that the backs or the faster payment will go. If there are any problems, there's a deadline for the clients to then tell us. On other levels of service, there would be a sign-off process in which we would get the client to actually sign off the backs amount or the payment amount that's going through. I don't know if that answers your question.
That sounded good to me. Do let us know, Ollie, if you need any more information. But thanks, Chris. So this is more of a general question. I'm going to give it to Anthony. What effect does the cost of living crisis have on the payroll world this year? We've covered this a little. I don't know if you wanted to give your thoughts.
It's a great question, and it's a big question, because I guess, well, a couple of thoughts. I'm sure everybody's got thoughts listening to that question. In the broadest sense, I think it just raises the stakes even more, if they could be raised, on the importance of accurate and timely pay for everybody. Given the pressures on household finances, that would be the first, I guess, sort of most obvious point. The second, I think, is that, you know, the cost of living isn't just a little bit of what I said earlier. I guess it's not just something that impacts households, but it obviously impacts organisations. Inflation has been high. Costs for all organisations have been rising very significantly, and as a result, investment decisions in organisations are subject to a lot of scrutiny, as companies are being very thoughtful about where and how they spend their money. So, and again, I won't repeat what I said earlier, but I think that means that making the case, the bar for making the case for change is quite high at the moment in organisations, versus think about in times in your career where the economy's been performing better, those choices can be more easily funded. So I think indirectly the cost of living crisis creates an environment where working in any organisation, making the case for change is harder, but arguably the benefits, particularly in the space that we all work in, you know, for not just the kind of the functional benefits in terms of productivity, but also the broader benefits for an organisation of an improvement across HR and payroll can be really felt. And I would just say one final thought is areas of innovation in payroll, which we haven't really touched on today, and I won't go off on one, but if you think about areas like real-time payroll, so the ability to keep payroll kind of put in a permanent state of pay, the ability to pay people out of cycle, etc., those kind of innovations that are very much coming, and I think for which there's quite a lot of demand for, also goes to the heart of the question of kind of cost of living and I guess access to earnings. And I think that'll be, I'm sure Vickie gets involved in lots of conversations on this topic. I think we'll be talking a lot more about that as an industry in the years to come.
Thank you for that. I know we're running a little out of time, but I just want to ask another quick question. This one's for Vickie. Because lots of people reported more frustrations, will any of these frustrations trickle down to the end users, so the employees, do you think?
That's a really good question. Do I think? So if I draw on my own experience from CIPP and listening to frustrations that members bring to us and some of the challenges there, yes, I do believe that some of these frustrations will trickle down to the employee. So payslip accuracy could be one. So if the payslips aren't accurate and those payslips get to the point where they are issued and there's errors, then that obviously has a direct impact on employees. I think another one which is potentially more common and linked to some of the areas around technology and AI and expectations of technology. I think that's where employees might feel the frustrations more. So if you are sharing pay information on self-service portals, particularly where they're linked not just to pay but HR functions as well, so booking annual leave, for example, and things like that. If those portals aren't user friendly, if there isn't the level of integration between payroll and HR as is expected to be able to do some of these things in a really streamlined and automated way, that's where the frustrations will really be felt by the employees. Yeah.
Thank you. Also a great answer. Great, thank you everyone for your questions. If there are any unanswered, we'll just answer them separately. And so we'll message you after this webinar. Just to wrap up very quickly, so of course we shared 5 headlines in this webinar, but there are actually 4 more headline stats for you that are waiting in the full report, including a bit more context on each one. So I'll send you the link to the full report in the webinar follow-up email, or you can just find it in our Knowledge Centre. So do check it out if you want to just brush up a little bit more on what you've learned here. This is what our Knowledge Centre looks like. It's on our website, you'll see it in the main menu. And it contains a lot of other great insights, including guides and other past webinars that you can delve into, all for free, just there as a resource for you. Also on our website and also linked through the main menu is our new mobile app interactive tool. So if you do want to explore how you can increase employee engagement, and take a look at kind of that UI piece that Vickie was just talking about, then please give it a look over, see what you think. And there's also a game that you can play to try and find your payslip as quickly as possible, which is good fun. So yeah, do give it a go. The web address is just there. And yes, finally, if you've listened to all of these findings and you're thinking about switching your payroll provider to get better software, then yeah, please consider Moorepay during your selection process. If you do need any more information just on our products and services, just pop it in the comment box and I can send you any links or access to more information. But that's it from us. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists, the biggest panel we've had yet since I've been here at Moorepay anyway. So I've very much enjoyed it and I hope everyone on the webinar has too. Thank you, everyone.